Hello, Dan Scott here, and I want to talk today on why we are so divided. Why are we divided along rural, urban uh, line, generations, religious differences, and of course the political divide, which we talk about constantly. So, why do these divisions exist? When we think about the reasons for division, we almost always think about it's that other side. If they weren't pushing such different opinions than mine and pushing down my throat things I don't want, everything would be fine. But of course, once we have the patience to listen to the people on that other side, we discover they feel exactly the same way. That people on our side are pushing things down their throat that they do not want. And so we begin to usually just kind of yell at one another because we don't know how to discuss. And we come to believe that the other side is simply not willing to engage, which sometimes is the case. There's people on both sides of any kind of argument that are really not wanting to discuss things. We find this often on social media. I've been amazed to find on Facebook, for example, someone posts an opinion and it seems like it's kindly stated, so I try to kindly present another viewpoint. And often, and you've probably had this experience, all these voices rush in to say you must be some kind of a fool. And it doesn't feel very well. It doesn't feel very good, and it can make you angry, can make you sad. And a lot of people have found that their mental health just cannot handle the rumble tumble of social media. And the reason is that on social media, there are not too many people that really truly want to engage. They want people that will champion their own opinions, and then when you talk to them in private, if you get to know them, you've talked to them face to face, you find a perfectly balanced, fine person, and they do not realize that in fact they're shutting down discussion because they don't really understand that they're people of goodwill and intelligence could actually have a different opinion than theirs. So what I wanted to do is get underneath the reasons for these differences, and the deep reasons of why that we are divided as we are is because we are well along into a gradual shift in the Western world, the Western Hemisphere, that began right about 1900 and just worked its way through various levels of kind of intellectual life and is finally at the popular level. And those differences concern question what is real, and we're defining reality itself differently. And so those of us who were raised in an older way of viewing and explaining and experiencing reality have an incredible challenge in understanding how people are coming up with the ways that they view things, the definitions they give for words, and we come to feel ourselves under constant attack. And some of that's real. There is a real anger sometimes against traditional viewpoints, but there's also millions and millions of people who are not angry. They just have been raised in a very different way of looking at things. In 1917, and I've talked about this on another video, but in 1917, Igor Stravinsky presented his Rite of Spring in Paris, in a theater in Paris. And as the Rite of Spring continued, half of the theater jumped up in joy and delight that he had broken through all of the boundaries of traditional music, and he was presenting something powerful and wonderful, and they were exhilarated. But the other half of the theater were trying to turn on the lights, and they were protesting, and they were angry, and finally policemen had to be brought in to calm the crowd down. And in the book, The Modern Mind, Peter Watson, this book, the subtitle is An Intellectual History of the 20th Century, and it's very readable and wonderful. It describes the changes through the century, year after year, in science and art and everything else. It's a wonderful book. But as he begins to describe what happened that night in 1917, he says this is a microcosm of all the changes that have been occurring in the Western world since. And the wars that we have fought, the two global wars, and the constant tension. You could even say that it's behind the war between Russia and Ukraine. This kind of, shall we go into the future or shall we retain our past? And so the kind of moderate persons that say we want to retain our past as we walk through the future sometimes find very little voice as these extremes get more and more shrill, and it can occur that no one is more disdained than the moderate who is trying to walk the balance between these differences. So we all find ourselves in a quandary on how to get along with our neighbors and how to have a civil family gathering as we talk about things that if you're as old as I am, you thought settled long time ago, and younger people or sometimes people of other ethnicities or cultures or other religions, they have very, very different ways of looking things, and sometimes we despair that we can ever find a sense of camaraderie and community that's united again. But of course that is possible. It's possible though because one learns how to listen to the deep opinions of one's neighbors. You don't dismiss their opinions very quickly and harshly as we see on social media. You certainly don't do that in person. You just begin by listening. Many years ago, a Muslim businessman in town wanted to take me to lunch, and we had some reasons for discussing some things that were occurring in our community. And to my surprise, he asked if I would ask the blessing for the lunch. And so I thought, how does one ask a blessing for lunch with someone of a different religion like this? And what came to me was this. I prayed and I said, Lord, we're two sons of Abraham here, staring at one another across a deep gorge that we did not create, that the history has created. And we want to be friends, and we want to find out how to help our community find some peace. Please help us today. And when I raised my eyes, I saw that my friend here had tears in his eyes. And he said to me, do you see me as a son of Abraham? And I said, I do. And he said, okay, we'll start there. We always have to find a starting place. It's much easier to find a place of departure from those, but find that place of disagreement. But that's the reason that we are in such violent disagreement now. We have given up, many of us, trying to find any place of agreement. And of course, it's always possible that you will listen to your neighbor's point of view and try to treat it respectfully and listen, but they will not reciprocate. And when that occurs, it's disappointing, it hurts. You can feel shamed, you can feel angry. But there's no real alternative to this. Either we're going to live in constant conflict and strife, or we learn to respect one another. And I think particularly as Christians, the responsibility lies with us, as the Apostle Paul says, as much as lies within you, be at peace with all people. We have to find those bridges. We have to construct those bridges. We have to look for that place of reconciliation. And when we must take a stand that we believe we have exhausted all possibilities for reconciliation and for connection, when we have to take that stand, we must do that reluctantly and with always a desire that there will be a quick resolution to the conflict. So as we continue on with this series, we're talking about how to cope with change. And the first part of coping with change is realizing why these changes exist. You have a wonderful day, and I always welcome your remarks. And as we continue, we'll try to make these more helpful to you and more interactive.